And you're all set, Holly.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the March 27th, 2026 Connecticut Paid Leave Finance and Audit meeting. I would like to call the meeting to order. The time is now 9:01 a.m. And Stephanie, will you please take attendance?
Yes, thank you, Holly. Adrian Cochran,
Present.
Andrea Comer, I don't believe has joined us yet. Ellen McKitterick,
Present.
Mike Soltis,
Present.
Holly Williams,
Present.
and Melissa Zubron.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I would like to thank any members of the public for joining us this morning. We have several past meeting minutes to vote on, so we'll just take them in order. The first one is a review of the December 19th, 2025 meeting minutes. Is there any discussion? No. May I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve the December 19th, 2025 minutes.
Thank you.
Second.
A second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, hearing none, the motion carries. Next, we'll have a review of the January 23rd, 2026 meeting minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I will abstain.
Thank you, Mike. We'll make a note. All right. The motion carries. And now a review of the February 27th, 2026 meeting minutes. Are there any corrections or discussion? All right, seeing none, may I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions?
I'm
I will
gonna
abstain.
I will too, because I don't remember if I stayed through the whole meeting. So just to be safe, I'm gonna abstain.
Okay. Thank you, Mike and Melissa. We'll make a note. Seeing no more, the motion carries. And that brings us up to date on our meeting minute votes. I appreciate the committee's time as we get up to date on those. So next we're going to have Dave lead us in a discussion of the draft budget for the fiscal year 2026 to 2027.
Thank you, Holly. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us this morning as it's that time of year again, and we talk about the upcoming fiscal year's budget, which I will be sharing now.
We can see your screen, Dave.
Thank you for the verification, Stephanie. Okay, as Holly mentioned, we will be reviewing the proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year ending June 30th, 2027. That does cover that does cover the period July 26th through June 27. Just as a reminder, there are three components to the budget. There's the operating component, which appropriately covers the operating expenses of the authority to run the paid leave program. There's the bond part of the budget, where we budget the bond money that we'll be using during the fiscal year. And there is the contribution budget, which budgets the contribution money coming in, the benefit payments going out, and the money for the operations that cover the operating budget above, as well as the fees needed for our benefit provider, AFLAC, and one or two other things we'll get to in a few minutes. But we're going to start with the operating budget. So the operating budget this year is a little over $17.5 million. The bulk of the revenue comes from the administrative fee, which is budgeted at $16.9 million. The other part of that are fund recovery penalties. That's budgeted at $656,000. The expenses of the authority, also at $17.5 million, are the typical expenses that you see in my monthly reports. That includes payroll, benefits, and pension, and that's budgeted at $11.4 million. The contact center, which provides support for our employers that remit the contributions on behalf of the employees, that's budgeted at $1.7 million. Outreach efforts for media and consultants, that is budgeted at $1 million. That number's been holding steady for a few years now. And that's for outreach for both employees who can use the program, as well as employers who fund the program. We also budget for software licenses to run the various platforms that keep the authority going. That's at $917,000. Our outreach efforts, our outreach contractors for our community engagement coordinator initiative is budgeted at $757,000. We also have some money budgeted for IT support as we need it at $321,000. We budget money for grievance adjudication, i.e. the appeals work that our partners at DOL do for us. That's at $215,000. And fund recovery fees, because we have the fund recovery penalties coming up in the revenue above, and they cover the fund recovery fees, which is the work that our fund recovery vendor does, TSI, to follow up on outstanding contributions. And that's budgeted at $207,000. Just as a reminder, last year, we set in place a formal policy and procedure regarding the redesignation of any operating funds that were left over from the prior year budget. So we are expecting at the beginning of the fiscal year for the operating fund to have about $2.2 million in it. And that's primarily driven from the better than budgeted results that we've been projecting out. So we are going to redesignate from the operating fund to the contribution fund about $1.6 million of that money, with $600,000 left over. That's a baseline cash amount that we keep in the bank account. As a reminder, the primary driver for redesignating those funds is so they can earn interest in the contribution fund. And that's why we redesignate them on an annual basis.
Dave, before you proceed, Melissa, did you want to ask your question now?
I can wait. I just, I'm writing down a few notes, so I'm happy to wait. Dave is always so thorough, so maybe he'll answer it before he gets to the end. So I'm happy to wait.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go over the significant assumptions behind the budget now, so that may answer your question, Melissa. I'm sorry, I didn't see, when I'm in presentation mode, I don't see hands up, so I apologize.
That's why I didn't interrupt you. You're in a good flow, Dave, so keep going.
Okay. All right. I appreciate you letting me keep the groove. But at the end of the operating budget part, if you have any follow-up questions regarding the operating budget, we could ask them at that time. I got another slide or two. Does that work for you? Okay, fantastic. All right. So where do these numbers come from? What are the significant assumptions behind them? We'll start with the revenue. The administrative fee is basically based on our total operating expenses for the year, so that the revenue agrees to the expenses, less any penalty revenue we have coming in, because that's additional revenue to the authority. So we don't need to budget an administrative fee for that. So, as I mentioned, $16.9 million budgeted for the administrative fee and another 656 for the fund recovery penalty revenue. And the fund recovery penalty revenue is based on historical trends we've seen for the past few years. And so that's where that number comes from. Moving on to expenses. The assumptions behind payroll are as follows. Number one, we have budgeted for 47 people at the beginning of the fiscal year, up to 50 by the end of the fiscal year. So there are 3 additions budgeted. As a reminder, just because the positions are budgeted at any time doesn't automatically mean we get filled. They get filled rather. We're always looking at what's happening and do we really need those positions at that time? And if we need to reevaluate a start date, we will do so. That number is not that much higher than where we expect to be at the end of fiscal year 26, where we expect to end with 46. The salary adjustments that are budgeted are the typical adjustments that we've seen in most prior years. There's a COLA adjustment of 2.5% in July of 2026 and a 3.5% step increase budgeted for January of 2027. Now, those adjustments for fiscal year 2026 haven't happened yet, but we are assuming that they are going to happen, and they will happen by the end of the fiscal year. If they don't and it spills into fiscal year 2027, then we will carry over that amount because it's already been budgeted in fiscal year 26, and we'll carry that over into the 2027 budget. So we have the money for that. Moving on to benefits, the total benefit rate is at 80%, 25% for healthcare. That's up 1% based on the historical trends we've been seeing. And also 55% for the pension obligation rate. That is up from 49% this fiscal year. And that is the expectation that we got from the state, specifically from the Office of the State Controller. And that's what they're predicting the pension overhead rate will be. They're usually pretty accurate in that regard. So we budgeted at the amount that they have expected it to be. Outreach expense is based on historical trends. It's $1 million, as I mentioned. It's been budgeted flat at that amount for the past 3+ years. So we expect to continue budgeting at that amount. The community engagement contractors, also part of our outreach program, is based on our current 10 contractors that we have now that just started in January of this year. That's up from the initial pilot of 7 that we started with. And there's some contractual price increases built in there. So the community engagement contractors will be at 10 for the coming fiscal year. We had thought about possibly increasing the number of contractors in the next fiscal year, but we're not. We're holding steady at 10. And finally, IT software, like I mentioned, is the various platforms we use: Salesforce, MuleSoft, ForgeRock. If you heard Matt talk at the budget meeting a few weeks ago, he mentioned those. And there's some increases in there based on what we've seen historically. I'm not going to go over every number on this chart, but I just wanted to show it as an illustration of how we approached the operating budget. The column on the left is the fiscal year 2027 budget that we're talking about now. And then the column next to it in the middle is last year's budget. And the gray next to it is the change from budget to budget. The column on the right is our latest and greatest projection of where we think we'll be at the end of fiscal year 26. In other words, it is an update of the budget based on the most recent information we have. And again, in the gray, it shows the changes year over year. In terms of payroll benefits and pension, you'll see that the number does go up year over year for the factors I discussed previously. I will point out that the fiscal year 27 budget assumes that all our positions are filled 100% all the time. That is not typically the case. Sometimes we have vacancies along the way during the year, or as I mentioned before, we may delay starting to hire of new positions that we have in the budget. So if you see some of these numbers compared to the projection and you're saying, why are the percentages higher? That's why. But to be conservative, we budget at that higher amount, assuming that we're 100% staffed, in case we actually are. And that's why that is. Outreach and media consultants is pretty much flat. There is an increase in CECI, as I mentioned, and some other increases like fund recovery fees in the contact center and software licenses that I discussed before. We know we have these increases, some of them beyond our control. So in light of that, we have decreased other line item expenses in the budget based on, again, on historical trends and seeing that we didn't need as much as we thought we did in our projection numbers. So we have lowered the expenses for IT consultants, grievance adjudication, temp services, printing and postage, and the contingency, which is the line we use for we don't know what we don't know. We have lowered all of those proactively because we just, based on our current expectations, that's the money we'll need in the current year budget. So we do look at expenses, and if we can ratchet them down, we do decrease them. So as a result of that, the increase in expenses budget over budget is just under 4%. And so we do, like I said, we do make the conscientious effort to take down what we can take down. Before I move on to the bond budget, I will pause for a second and ask if anybody has any questions.
Thanks, Dave. I still have a couple of questions, but I appreciate the overview. My first question is, do you have a historical look back since inception on what the wage increases have been for the authority for staff every year since inception?
Yes. So I don't have that at my fingertips right now, but I can get that for you. But high level, I can tell you that with the exception of the current fiscal year 2026, we have had both the COLA increases and the step increases every year from inception. And they've roughly been about at that 2.5% and 3% rate that I mentioned.
Steve, I'm not
Okay.
sure we had it in 2020
Oh, okay.
since you've been here.
Since my inception.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, yeah. All right.
Okay.
So since fiscal year 2022, and maybe part of fiscal year 2021, but that's a fair statement. Okay.
Okay.
Since I've been here.
And okay. And I guess let me just ask a philosophical question on why are employees in this organization qualify for the step? I understand a COLA and I understand the reasons for that, but explain to me is it in our bylaws? Was it created legislatively? How did we reach the decision to not only offer a COLA, but also a step?
Well,
And how do we, go ahead.
go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't
I
realize
was
you were.
just saying, how do we define those scales as they do in a normal state union contract?
Oh, okay. So the short answer is yes, because we are state employees, and that was determined in the beginning with the authority. Erin can lend some color on more of the specifics, but we are all state employees, and as a result of that, those employees uh, who are eligible to be in unions are in unions.
Yeah.
So obviously whatever contract the state has with those unions, we follow as well.
Yeah, and I recall a previous conversation with Aaron. We talked about this some sort of a related statute, and so I appreciate it. I just want to get that on the record. But then also, just to follow up, it's I haven't seen a 3% step increase. I've seen 2.5. Why are we going to 3? And has that been historically what we've also given as an increase since inception? Meaning following the actual union contract, or have we been more generous?
No, we have to follow the union contracts, so we can't be more generous than that. I will say, depending where you are in the step, it could be anywhere between 2.5% and 3%. And as far as employees who are not in a bargaining unit, the authority typically has increased employees at 3% as voted on and approved by the board, which
So
always happens. Oh, go
can I
ahead. Yes,
just jump
please.
in?
Yeah.
So for the non-union staff, we have historically followed what DAS and OPM issue as an E item for executive branch non-unionized employees. So it has varied between 2.5 and 3. We budget for 3 so that we don't have to come back mid-year, and so that we don't have to redo all of our other uh, assumptions throughout the year. So, but we have not gone above what the state does. We have followed what the state does, with the exception, as I said, I feel like that first year we didn't do anything. I mean, we did a ton, but we didn't do anything in terms of staff increases.
No, we did
Okay.
not. That's true. Yes.
All right. I appreciate it. I think it's important to, have these conversations as it relates to that, because there is a nuance with the quasi nature. And, there's been a long history of differentiation between the quasi agencies and how each of them are addressing their own inner workings. And I just think it's important not to assume that everybody is the same, which is why I was asking those questions. The follow-up question I have is on outreach. I did have somebody reach out to me. They didn't know I was a member of the board, and they had reached out to me because they were wondering, I guess they were at some event and Paid Family had a table and were handing out bags and other pieces of merchandise, which I know is typical for a trade show or something like that. But they were asking me, geez, that seemed to be excessive. What is the budget for these things? And I guess I don't want to assume, but maybe you could point me in the right direction. Am I assuming that those items are within the outreach budget of $1 million, or are they? Okay.
Yes.
And okay. And the $1 million outreach budget, what does that, and what are the components of that? Besides like what I mentioned, like the merchandise, which I understand in a lot of arenas, you hand out, stress balls or pens, things like that. It's pretty common,
Right,
but what
right,
is
yeah.
the component of it?
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, it's not $1 million of tchotchkes.
I
can tell
know.
you, I could tell you that.
I
But
know.
what,
That's why
right,
I'm asking.
right. But what that is outreach efforts, like things, bulletin boards, for example, a lot of advertising like that. Radio, we do, online. multimedia, Facebook, Meta, all those things. And like I mentioned, both to the employee base and the employer base, because there's always new employers coming. So you want to make sure that they're aware of the program and their obligations on behalf of their employees to the program. We also have some, when needed, we have some outside consultants we use to help us on the best way, most effective ways to use our outreach efforts. So we really try and maximize the dollars we use. As I mentioned, we've been keeping that number flat for 3+ years. And because we have this program, that's why we do all these outreach efforts, because we want to make sure people are aware of the program, and if they're a covered employee, that they can use the program, or if they're an employer, that they're doing the right thing and submitting contributions to the authority.
So I
No,
just want to jump in. We can reshare what Jessica shared I've lost track of time. Some point in the last several months, Jessica, we had that deep dive into the outreach budget, so we can definitely reshare that with the committee. Because the vast majority of that money is, as Dave said, is really the media, radio, billboards, internet, really the consultants do things like film the ads. They're it's a lot of it is sort of passed through to the production piece of it.
Yeah, no, I imagined it was a lot of different components of that one line item, which is why I asked the question specifically, because I think people, might see one person sees that and maybe they're not seeing the board, they're not seeing the outreach, they're not seeing the other components of it. So I just wanted to make sure that we're talking about the whole picture. And then finally, back to the employers portion of the outreach. I really like that. I wonder if more employers knew that they had the opportunity to maybe host an outreach event or do some sort of proactive work on behalf of their employees, or maybe a chamber of commerce. I'm sure you interact in that way, but I'm glad to hear that we're also focusing on making sure that we're providing a safety net to our employers who often don't have the human resource component in their office. And so I'm glad to hear that we have that bridge too. So thank you.
I just to give a plug to Jessica, she has been taking the list of new entities that register with the Secretary of State together with the new entities that register with us, that give us contact information, and reaching out to them. And she hosts a monthly webinar for employers, which is sort of part of our resurgence of outreach to employers. And again, we're going to be doing that wonderful leave management conference in September for employers. So please pass the word along to your contacts and communities as we get going. And Nicole has been doing a great job with chambers of commerce and local municipalities. We were in New Milford Wednesday, we were in South Windsor the other day, we'll be in Berlin next week. So really trying to get out and make sure that employers know how to do what they need to do. It's a relatively small lift. It's really making sure their payroll is set up properly, and then knowing how to fill out the form if their employee takes a claim. But we want to make sure they feel comfortable and they're not scared, because we know that it can be overwhelming if you're really not familiar with the process.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. I appreciate all that backup info. Thanks again.
You're welcome. Okay, with that, we will move on to the next segment of the budget, the bond budget. The bond budget, we will be utilizing about $300,000 this year. We expect to have $900,000 at the beginning of the fiscal year, and that is what we have of the amount that's been allocated of $16 million. We do have $26 million authorized. So there is the potential in the future to allocate additional funds, but we have no plans to do so at this time. So the $300,000 would basically be used for continued and necessary system enhancements that we make throughout the year, and the projects for those enhancements are expected to be undertaken during the first half of the year. So no plans for any additional requests for bond funds at this time. Moving on to the contribution budget. We'll start with the numbers that we budgeted for. So the money coming in, first off, is the redesignation from the operating reserves of $1.6 million that we went over earlier. Contributions are budgeted at $504.1 million. Fund recovery here is fund recovery contributions and interest, as opposed to the penalties that are in the operating budget. The penalties are to cover operating expenses, but any true contributions we get in from the fund recovery and the interest go in the contribution budget. And that's budgeted at just under $2.9 million. Investment income is budgeted at $16.4 million. Claims and benefit payments are at $549.4 million for the expenses of the fund this year. Oh, okay, thought I heard somebody. The benefit administration expenses that we pay to AFLAC, it's $25.6 million. The paid leave expense, you should be getting deja vu because it's the same as the operating budget amount, just over $16.8 million. And the annual bond repayment we make at $1.9 million. So when you do the math, we expect to be at $504.4 million by the end of the fiscal year. More on that in a minute or two. Again, I want to talk about the significant assumptions behind the budget that explains where the numbers are coming from. So the payroll contributions of over $504 million. Working with our actuaries, that includes a 3.6% salary growth. That is down from last year's assumptions of 4%. We also have a projected change in unemployment, and that change in unemployment has gone up to 4.6%, and that's an increase over last year. And so, why do we make those changes? Because we are continuing to seeing a softening of wages that are coming into the fund, softening of those wages and the overall economy, as I've been discussing in the past few months. So as a result of those, we have taken those into account for next year's fiscal year contributions. The fund recovery assumptions, again, those are based historically on the activity we've had for the past 2 or 3 years, and that's where those numbers come from. The investment income is budgeted at a rate of 3.1%. That is lower than where we are now. Right now, we are at 3 3/4. We started the fiscal year at 4.4. So it's been going down. And so based on the information that we received from the Office of Policy and Management, the expectation is that the Fed fund rate will continue to go down, and the STIF account, where short-term investment fund, where the funds of where the paid leave authority money is invested in, is related to that rate. So in other words, if the Fed fund rate goes up, the stiff rate goes up. And if it goes down, then the stiff rate goes down. So there's a correlation there. So because of that reason, we are expecting a lower investment rate next fiscal year based on the information we have so far. Moving on to expense assumptions. Like I said, the benefit payments are at $549.4 million. We have seen year-over-year increases in claims of about 10%. We've also correlated to that. We've also seen benefit payments increase at about that. Also, working with the actuaries, the incident rate has also gone up by about 10%. The incident rate is the percentage of potential covered employees that will utilize the plan. We are budgeting that based on, like I said, working with our actuaries at spring and their latest report. We are budgeting that at 5.7%. That is up roughly 10% from the rate that we've been seeing lately, which is at 5.2%. And our expectation for the next fiscal year is that that rate that increase, that 10% increase rate is going to continue. So we are budgeting at that rate. The benefit administrative fee is primarily driven by the contract we have with AFLAC. So that's where that number comes from. The paid leave administrative fee, that's the same as the operating budget. It better be, or the math doesn't work. So that's where that number comes from. And the bond repayment of $1.9 million, that's based on a principal amount of $16 million at a 3.5% interest rate, which is pretty good if you're looking at interest rates. That was established a few years ago in conjunction with the state, and it was for a 10-year period. And so this repayment will be the 5th repayment of the year. I'm sorry, 5th repayment of the repayment plan, not of the year. We only pay it once a year. Again, I just want to show comparisons year over year, just to show how numbers have changed. So again, the fiscal year 27 budget is on the left. The 26 budget is in the middle. And the latest and greatest projection for fiscal year 26 is on the right. Contributions are budgeted at an increase of less than 3%. Again, for the factors I described earlier. So that's why we are budgeting at a less than 3% rate. In the past, it's been higher than that, but we're just not seeing the quarter over quarter or year over year increases we have in the past. So we are budgeting appropriately at the current rates. Investment income at 16.4, like I mentioned, the interest rate is down and we expect it to continue to decrease. So because of that, we would be earning less investment income. So that's why the 16.4 is lower than last year's number. Benefits, like I mentioned, we've been seeing roughly 10% increases. We are expecting benefits paid in the current fiscal year to come in at just under $502 million. So the math is a 9.5% increase at just over $549.4 million. The administrative fee, we entered it, like I mentioned, that's contractually driven. You may remember we entered into a new contract with AFLAC. And so based on that contract, that's where the number comes from. And then the administrative fees are from the operating budget, and that's the number I went over before. Before I go on the timeline, I just do want to address, I know that the fund balance is decreasing this year. That wasn't entirely unexpected. If you remember the actuarial report that we shared back in July, this fiscal year, there was a decrease expected. We're actually going to have a decrease in the fund balance this fiscal year as the projection showed last month and will show this month. So we have been expecting this to happen, but it's happening sooner than expected. So we are trying to stay ahead of that, and we realize that things need to be addressed. So what are we doing about that? Number one, we are waiting for the next quarter of contributions, calendar quarter 1 of 2026, which ultimately will come in by the end of April, because that is our largest quarter of contributions for the year. So we want to see what that number looks like and see if the trend holds. In terms of expenses, like I mentioned, we have made certain cuts in the operating budget or not increased certain items in the operating budget to really keep it as tight as possible and only spend what we need to. So coming up with options and solutions to make sure and maintain the solvency of the fund involves quite a few people, not just obviously not just the Finance and Audit Committee. So we'll be working with all our interested partners on that, because the economy, like I mentioned, is softening, and that's unfortunately beyond our control. So we have to work with that, and we need to basically still continue run the program within those confines of that. So our goal by the end of the fiscal year is that we'll have an idea of what next steps are going to be and what actions that we should take to keep maintaining the fund for the long term. Having said that, the immediate next steps for this budget are the following. The rules call for 31 days for the Finance Committee to review the budget. The next scheduled Finance Committee meeting is only 28 days. So we're asking for you all to vote on a motion to reduce the period from 31 days to 28 days. So basically 4 weeks for the Finance Committee to review the budget and come back with questions or feedback or anything of that nature. At the next Finance and Audit Committee meeting, our goal is to finalize the budget so we can take it to the board and do so at the next scheduled meeting, which is May 14th. The board at that time can vote to approve the budget, or if they feel more time is needed, they could do one of two things. The budget is supposed to be approved by May 31st, so the board could call a special meeting, or they could vote to wait until the next regularly scheduled meeting, which would be June 11th, and then decide to finalize the budget then. So at this point, I'm happy to take any additional questions regarding the budget at this time. I just want to thank everybody for sitting through that and entertaining me. I know it's a lot, but there's a lot that goes in there, and so we just want to make sure everybody's informed. Mike. Mike, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Can you put up the second to last slide, not the budget timeline, but the one before that?
Sure. Hold on one second, please, sir. This one? Oh, I'll go back one. Back one. Back one.
Back one.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so looking at the benefits line, Somehow I heard your discussion about things going up 10%, 10%, 10%, and the benefits are going up 15.6%. I wonder if you could revisit that issue and tell me what's going up 10% because our benefit payments are going up 15%.
Right. So this was the budget we had done. So the budget we had done about a year ago from now was based on the assumptions back then. And so we had budgeted $475.3 million. And what we've seen since then, a year from now, is an increased utilization more than we had expected for the budget. And so that's why we budgeted at 475.3, but you'll see our latest projection is at $501.9 million because for example, the incident rate has increased up more than we expected and things of that nature. So that's what, so you see that 15.6. Yes, that's true. That's from a year ago, but it's closer to the 10% because that's based on where we think this current fiscal year 2026 will end.
Got it.
Okay.
So this fiscal year, we're paying out a little bit less than $10 million a week in benefits, if my rough math is correct.
Yes, sir.
And it seems like next year we're anticipating closer to 14 million a week.
Roughly, yes. I mean, it is. I mean, it's been going up at that rate for the
Yeah.
past year and
Wow,
plus.
that's
So
significant.
yeah, no, it is. It is. Yes, it is. So
Just to be clear, we don't think it's going to immediately be 14 million on July 1st, right?
agreed. Yes.
It's
Yes.
that sort of every time frame that we look at, it's about 10% more than the previous year. So it is a steady increase,
Right.
not jumping.
Right.
But the yearly average will be
Right.
that bigger amount. In the past couple of years, we've had to readjust mid-year because our springtime estimates have been low, and then we end up doing like a mid-year adjustment. And so in developing this year's budget, so we just don't have reason to credibly assert that we think the growth in claims is going to be less than it's been historically. So rather than sort of just budget with hope, we just figured it's better to budget with historical data. So that's why we've put this number in, but that's, again, we're not going to be paying, we shouldn't be paying 14 million a week, sort of starting July 1st. It's more that will be the
Right.
average when you look at the year.
Okay. So my second question is there any metric from other states, and I know some have standalone programs and some don't, so a metric of the operating expenses versus the size of the program. In other words, I look at our contributions, or let's look at 523 million, right? Add in the investment income. And our administrative fees are, say, roughly 17 million. So that's probably a shade under 3%, right? Our costs to administer this program.
Right.
Are there any national metrics to compare? Is that low? Is that within the range?
Right. So, Mike, that is a great question. And the challenge is that there's not anything published automatic national like that. And because whenever people try, the challenge is, as you pointed out, different programs have different things. And in fact, and different states do things differently. And what I mean by that, like, for example, is we're a quasi, right? And we do everything. including contribution work, fund recovery work, counting the money, reconciling the money, collecting the funds, and all that. Other paid leave programs who are a more direct part of the state, part of an agency, will have other agencies do that work for them, like the equivalent of the Connecticut State Department of Revenue Services, for example, will do that work. So that's not counted in their operating expenses at all. So number one, so their rate would look lower to ours if you didn't know that. That's number one. Another example is number two is certain states calculate overhead differently, including things like medical, pension, or even other operating expenses overhead. And so the specific paid leave program might not be charged for that overhead rate. So again, if you're just looking at it, dollar to dollar, ours would be higher, but we do pay for that. So, and those are just two examples of differences of how those numbers are calculated. And in fact, we work with a coalition of states, NASWA, and I forget at the moment what it stands for. But one of the things we are doing with them is a common definition of certain terms that are used in the industry, so we can come to like a common meeting. Because right now, if you just like take the dollars, there's just too many variables and how the different programs work. So you can't always take it at face value.
So Dave is
But-
absolutely correct, but I will say that in the early days of sort of the legislative expectations and the actuaries that were retained prior to the program being created in the earliest days, there was an expectation that at maturity, there would be like a 5% number, sort of hovering around 5, nothing set in stone. So being under 5, particularly considering that we pay for things, as Dave said, that nobody else pays for.
Yeah.
I think we are in a good place, and we know from doing the numbers at least 3 or 4 times now that the AFLAC contract is a cost-effective and very efficient contract for us instead of trying to build it ourselves.
Yeah.
So we are pretty lean on that side. And it's something, as Dave said, that as more and more states come on board, we're trying to develop more common definitions so we compare apples to apples.
Well, my gut tells me under 3 is very good. That's just my gut.
Yeah.
Do you know how that percent in this budget like compares to our last few years? I mean, are we pretty steady, slightly under 3%, or has it been going up or going down?
It's been
Well,
going down, right, Dave?
yeah, it's going down because our expenses have been our operating expenses have been pretty steady. I mean, there's a small increase every year, but like if you're comparing it to benefits paid or even contributions coming in, those have been growing at a larger rate. So
Gotcha.
that percentage has been somewhat. I mean, we've had increases over the year. In the beginning, we had larger increases to staff as we were getting set up and things. But over the past 2 or 3 years, when we've been more of a steady state, it certainly hasn't gone up, and it has gone down a bit in terms of a
All
percentage.
right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Mike. Thank you. Melissa?
Thanks, Dave. And maybe I see Ellen is on as well. And my question has to do with the adjudication cost in the operating budget.
Yes.
I know just from listening to testimony, listening to the labor commissioner talk about some potential federal reductions in staffing. I just want to be sure that that operating amount of 215,000 is enough to get the job done, while at the same time I know DOL is struggling with staffing. So I just wanted to do a quick gut check on that.
Oh, yeah, no, it's pretty realistic. We have seen the number of appeals over time go down, um, which is fortunate. So that's in no small part to our own benefits team, uh, because before it even gets to the appeals process, if it's denied, we have a process of reconsideration, and the authority will work with claimants to find out what the issue was in their submission and work for it to get approved. So as a result of that activity, the amount that's going into appeals has gone down. So, and that's been pretty steady for the past few years. But the staffing is adequate. It's not too much. You know, we work with DOL regularly, seeing what the appeals volume is and the people they have working on it, and things like that. So we are in regular contact with them to make sure the staffing's not, you know, too high or too low for that matter.
Okay, great. Thank you. Like I said, I just want to do a quick gut check, as I know there's some other things happening in other places, but it does have an intersect with us. So I appreciate the additional clarification.
You're welcome.
I have one question, Dave, if no other committee members have any questions. I'm not seeing any. Um, early on in the presentation, you had talked about sort of some dampening in wages on the employer side. And I just want to kind of crosswalk that with what we're seeing on the benefit payment side. And I think it's because the incidence rate is going up. So we're not seeing the wage dampening impact our monthly benefit payment number. But is the wage base going down? Like, is it contracting even though incidence is going up? I guess what's happening on that employer wage side, if you have
Right.
any insight.
Right. Well, so as you might imagine, there's quite a few factors that go into that, but one of them, well, one of them is the incidence rate. The other is duration of the benefit paid. Another one is average weekly benefit paid, and we actually saw those numbers decrease from our previous assumptions. So we did temper those and take those down somewhat. But the incident rate itself is like it's the biggest driver of the benefit payments. So that's why I focus that one. Uh, so we have seen somewhat. So we did reduce our assumptions uh, based on that decrease. Uh, and so I think I see what you're getting at. Like if the wages are going down, then the benefit payments should also be going down, but the benefit calculation is based on uh it I don't want to get it. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it's based on multiple quarters and and like the highest amount of that quarter. And there's all sorts of factors that go into that. So as time goes on, that dampening effect will be more in involved in the benefit payments.
No, that was helpful. The only reason I was asking, because if I kind of like go in the time machine back, one of the conversations that we had was sort of like, to what extent trends that you're seeing in paid leave have any direct relationship towards the kind of the other macroeconomic things going on. And I know at the time, you know, you all were kind enough to kind of indulge that thought process. And the conclusion was essentially like, there isn't a direct one-to-one relationship in kind of how those things ebb and flow. And so I just asked the question because I'm curious as to kind of why we're seeing some of that dampening. And I know there's probably lots of factors, but But that's why I asked the question. So I appreciate you answering that. And then with regards to investment assumptions, just correct me if I'm wrong. I think that the decrease in the rate on for the stiff account was around 1%. So we were at like
Oh,
mid
yes,
fours
yes.
and okay.
Yeah, no, budget over budget. So last year we had budgeted at 4.1%. And so
Mhm.
that is effectively where we are at. We're gonna come out this year because of the
Okay.
decrease from 4.4 to 3.75, assuming
Got
it
it.
stays at 3.75. It
Right.
could be less than 4.1 if it goes down. But yes, you are correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So do any of my colleagues have any additional questions? Okay. I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Dave. And so the last slide that Dave showed presented an action item for this committee with regards to the review time frame. So just as a reminder, per the bylaws, the committee has 31 days to review the draft budget before it meets again, unless the committee votes to reduce this period. 31 days, as Dave presented, will bring us to Monday, April 27th. Our next scheduled meeting is Friday, April 24th. And so we're asking the committee to consider a motion to reduce the review and comment period from the 31 days to 28 days.
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Dave, you're on the hot seat again, and you're going to walk us through a budget review of spending to date.
Okay. Thank you, Holly. All right, so let's talk about February of 2026.
We can see your screen, Dave.
Thank you as always. Okay, so for February 26th, we'll start with the operating account as we always do. Our activity was negative $1.1 million for the month. That was a $63,000 positive variance. That's a little lower than usual. That's mostly because of a timing difference. We got a software license that we paid this month. That was the ForgeRock license, and it had been budgeted earlier, so we paid it this month. And so as a reason, and so that's why you'll see a negative amount here. But year to date, we are still pretty close to budget, and expect to be at budget for that line by the end of the year. The other item was a grievance adjudication. I'm sorry, I know I'm bouncing around here a little bit. Grievance adjudication. We had been billed for 2 quarters. Normally we're billed 1 quarter, but they were catching up on their billing, so we were billed for 2 quarters. So there was a negative variance there for the month of $11,000, but we're still ahead of budget by year to date by almost $91,000. Significant expenses for the month were the typical ones. Payroll and related was $705,000. Software licenses, like I mentioned, was $195,000. The contact center was $137,000. Outreach, including the community engagement coordinator program, was $118,000. And grievance adjudication was $86,000. Year to date, including the redesignation transfer we made at the beginning of the year, we're at negative 10.8. That is over a $1.9 million positive variance for the year. And that's pretty much where we expect that variance to be by the end of the fiscal year. Bond money, we used almost $35,000 for the month. That was $7,000 less than we expected to use. So that helped the year-to-date variance of about $43,000. We think we'll be pretty close to budget by the end of the year. But even if it's slightly over we'll still have enough money in there. We're at just under $1.1 million now. So like I mentioned in the budget for fiscal year 27, we expect to be around $900,000 by the end of the fiscal year. Contribution activity for the month of February was a negative $37.3 million. That did result in a negative variance of $1.1 million. That was, as usual, primarily driven by the benefit payment of negative $1.9 million. Per Mike's question earlier, when we had budgeted this last year, that was at a lower rate than we're seeing now. So this month we were at $38.7 million. That is a weekly rate of $9.7 million. And that's up from the prior month as expected, because in December and January, we usually see a seasonal lull, and then it starts picking up again in February. Last month, by point of comparison, was at 9.2. So we're back at 9.7, which is about the number that we saw in terms of trends pre-holiday, pre-December. We were ranging between 9.6 and 9.9. So we're back in that range again. Contributions for the month, we're at almost $1.2 million, higher than what we had budgeted by over $879,000. So that helped our year-to-date variance, which has gone down to a negative $800,000. Year-to-date, our activity is just under 12.3. It is a negative variance compared to budget of negative 17.7. And again, that's primarily driven by the higher than budgeted benefit payments that we have been seeing. As far as that, where that leaves the fund is at just over $598.1 million as of February. Most of that money, as I mentioned earlier, is sitting in the short-term investment fund account at almost at $580.9 million. All other assets are typical of where they've been at this time. The operating balance is at 3.9. The bond, I said, is at 1.0. And the only liabilities we have on a cash basis are the bond money we owe, and we'll be making that payment in June, as we historically do. Fiscal year-end projection, we did see these numbers earlier in the budget, so I won't dive too much into them. But like I mentioned earlier, we do expect to be at $1.9 million by the end of the fiscal year, ahead of budget. So we'll be at, including the redesignation, we'll be at a negative $12.5 million. Before the designation, that's almost $1.7 million compared to a negative $160,000 we had budgeted last year. And contribution activity, this projection has not changed since last month. As we did mention, we are projecting a negative result of $12.7 million at the end of the fiscal year. That is almost $25 million less than we had budgeted at the end of the year. And that will leave the fund at roughly at a balance of, I had that number, 507, north of $570 million by the end of the fiscal year. So that's where we expect to be by the end of the fiscal year, and that's where we are now of February. Again, I'm happy to take any questions from the committee at this time.
I don't see any. So thank you, Dave, for walking us through that. Is there any old business that anybody would like to discuss? New business? All right, not seeing any. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. And a second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. The time is now 10:10. Thank you, everybody, for your time this morning, and enjoy your weekend.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.